Thank you, Corey. It made me realize that even for those that might be somewhere and don't even have a Bible, the very creation screams out that there's a God and that He loves you. It's very powerful. Our scripture reading today is from Psalms 92, 15 through, or Psalms 92, 12 through 15. Sorry, I lost my place here. Psalms 92, 12 through 15. It says here, the righteous shall flourish like the palm tree. He shall grow like a cedar in Lebanon. Those that be planted in the house of the Lord shall flourish in the courts of our God. They shall bring forth fruit in old age. They shall be fat and flourishing, to show that the Lord is upright. He is my rock, and there is no unrighteousness in Him.
Good morning. Again, Corey, thank you for that song. That song, I told Corey this morning when he sang it for first service, that song is like the story of my life. No matter how long it takes, God's love would find a way. When I get up here, I'm usually telling children's story. And to me, that's kind of, I don't get real nervous doing that because I'm talking to kids and I can relate to kids really well. So if you folks don't mind, today you're all kids. So don't act up, but as far as I'm concerned, you're all kids today. A lot of you know most of my childhood experiences and younger years because of the children's stories that I've told. I was born in Longview. When I was 2 years old, my folks moved to Tillamook, Oregon area on a dairy farm. I lived there for 6 years, and then they moved back to the battleground area, and that's where I spent the rest of my life, except for 3 years that I spent in the Marine Corps. And then I came back here, and this is where I've been. I graduated from Battleground High School in 1965. Yeah, hooray, yeah, Battleground. My religious experience, when I was young, my folks would take me and my older sister, I had a sister 11 months older than me. They would take us to Sunday school, drop us off when they thought we needed it, and then they would pick us up when Sunday school was over and bring us home. My folks never went to church, but I guess they did see value in giving us kids an interest in it, and it was the closest church to us always. It was never a particular denomination, it just was a church. I didn't learn much in Sunday school. What I did learn didn't make me really happy. I learned that the good people God got, and they got to go to heaven, sit on a cloud, and play a harp all day. I was pretty active, and to me that didn't sound like something that I wanted to spend an eternity doing. But the alternative was that the devil got the bad ones. That God and Satan were in partnerships, kind of. This is the way I understood. God got the good ones, the devil got the bad ones, and the bad ones burned in hell for all eternity. And that was just the way it was. I didn't really want to pay much attention to a God that would burn someone in hell for all eternity just because they weren't good. So I pretty much, I can't remember going back to church after I was 15 years old, or back to Sunday school after I was 15 years old, except maybe for a wedding, but then it was in and out. I stayed away from religious people because they made me uncomfortable, for one thing, and I didn't like to be reminded of where I was bound to go. After I got out of the service, I got married, and in the late 1970s, I had a wife and 2 kids. I was working. My dad had a paving company, and so I was working with my dad at the paving company. And so things seemed to be going well. And about this time, there was a group of people. One other thing, when I was growing up, we lived about 2.5 miles north of Meadowglade. My mother had warned me very emphatically, stay away from those people. Those people are strange. They have some strange beliefs, and don't ever let them get a hold of you, because you stay away from them. So I one of the few times that I actually listened to my mother. So in the late 70s, married, had a wife, 2 kids, and a group of people in Meadowglade, they went to the Meadowglade church, decided that they were going to swarm off and start a new church in Orchards. And among that group of people was an elderly couple, Theron and Elizabeth Treat. Theron had been a Seventh-day Adventist pastor in his younger years, and no longer was a pastor, and actually had gone into nursing, had worked at the Vancouver Memorial Hospital, and when he ended up work there, he was still doing in-house on-call stuff for the hospital. And he and Elizabeth were part of that group. Well, Theron was getting up there in years, and so some of the people in that group thought, it would be really neat is if Theron had one last Bible study, because he was really getting up there, and they didn't know how much longer he would be around. And they thought it would be really great if Theron could have one last Bible study and bring someone into the church. And so they started praying for fruit for Theron, someone that he could study with, someone that he could lead to the Lord and bring into the church. They didn't have any names. They just said, Lord, we want Theron to study with someone. And so about the same time, we started looking for a house to buy. We thought, it would be nice if we had our own house. And so we looked around and we found a house out in the Orchards area. And we thought, wow, this is pretty cool. A newer 3-bedroom house, great, big lot there, and room for the kids to play, and just what we thought would be the perfect house. So we went forward on it. I tried to get a loan through the VA, and things, when you're going through any government type thing like that, it's really, really slow. And so it was into the second month. Well, second month was almost over before it came down to the final thing, and that was an inspection on the house. Well, while this was happening, the people that lived next door to Theron and Elizabeth moved out of their house. So now the prayer from the group of people got a little more down to business. It was like, okay, Lord, the house next door to Theron is empty. Put somebody in that house that he can study with. And so the inspection results on our house that we wanted came back, and it was like, it's bad. The whole underfloor of the house and the structure was full of termites. And the VA obviously wouldn't loan money on that, and so, that was the end of the deal. Our real estate lady, really nice lady, and she said, don't be discouraged, because we were thinking, forget it, we don't want to do this again. She says, there's this really nice little house in Meadowglade that I think you should look at. Well, immediately my thought was, Meadowglade, no, don't want to go to Meadowglade. Remember what my mom said about the people in Meadowglade. Don't want to get wrapped up there. And so we said, no, we don't want to do that. She says, I just feel and our real estate lady was a very religious person. She lived in Battleground. She wasn't a Seventh-day Adventist, but she was very devout. And she says, I really think you ought to go look at that house, just to look at it, And so we said, to make her happy more than anything, all right, we'll look at it, but we don't want it. And she said, all right. So we went and we looked at the house. Less than a month later, the house was ours, and we were moving in on a Saturday morning. And when Theron and Elizabeth came home from church, in our church, we had their driveway blocked. And they were nice, and they kind of went around the truck and introduced themselves to us, and we thought, okay, yeah, they're old, they're probably pretty harmless. And so we went about our business, and Theron and Elizabeth were extremely nice to us. They were helpful. They had this huge arbor of grapes, and they said, wow, more grapes than we can use. Help yourself to some grapes, and always very helpful. And we appreciated it, but that barrier was up there. Wasn't going to get hooked into any Bible studies or anything with any Adventists, because I wasn't going to go there. And so after we'd been there for a while, the summer of 1979, the spring summer, I was still doing paving, and in the summertime we ramped up because business was slow in the winter, fall because of the rain. And we hired, at the paving company, we hired a truck driver. Let's say his name was Jeff. That's not his name, but to protect his innocence or whatever, we'll call him Jeff. Well, Jeff was a horse trainer, race horses. He raced horses at Portland Meadows and also in Seattle at I don't even know the name of the racetrack there, don't remember it. But anyway, through the summer, Jim and I got pretty well acquainted, and he'd have these stories about horse racing, and all this stuff, and I was like, wow, this sounds pretty cool, So about October, he had finally talked me into going into the racehorse business, and so he said, let's, to get you started, let's buy a horse together, and to pay for the training and the keep and everything of your horse, you can come over to Portland Meadows and get a groom license, and that way you can work there at Portland Meadows, and that way it won't cost you anything to pay for, we'll buy the horse, and your half of the, the training and the feed and everything else, you can clean stables for that. And I have 10 stables there at Portland Meadows, and you can clean those. That'll pay for your horse. And I thought, wow, it's pretty cool, And I could just see, money just rolling in hand over fist from this racehorse. So we got a horse. His name was Long Green. Great horse. And so I quit my job, and I was working at Portland Meadows, and the first race, he won. Oh, great, oh boy, here we go. And the purse was, I think it was somewhere around $2,000, and I thought, oh, good, there's a quick $1,000. And Jeff said, no, we can't take the money out. We have to have some money in reserve here, because you never know what's going to happen. I thought, wow, okay, cool. So the next week, the horse ran again, and he came in second, but he hurt his leg. And so the vet had to be called, and that started costing money. And the horse's leg was hurt. He couldn't run anymore till his leg got healed. And so that money that he had won was rapidly going downhill, and I didn't have any money coming in. And so I said, I need to make some money. And Jim says, well, this other horse trainer and I have some horses out in Hawkinson at his facility out there. And there are 16 stalls out there that if you're willing to go out and clean those 16 stalls, we'll pay you $100 a week. And I thought, wow, $100 a week is $100 a week more than I have now. So I said, okay. And so my day looked something like this. I was up at 3:30 in the morning, went over to Portland Meadows, cleaned 10 horse stalls, exercised the horses, drove out to Hawkinson, cleaned 16 stalls, and then on the nights when they had the races, I would go back to Portland Meadows, and I wouldn't get home until maybe midnight at night. And my thoughts of fame and fortune were rapidly going downhill. A little advice for anyone, should you ever want to buy a horse in partnerships, buy the head part. It's much easier to feed them than clean up after them. So I was getting pretty tired of cleaning stables and not much time for any kind of entertainment or recreation. So December 23rd of 1979, and I can remember the date well because it was the day before Christmas Eve, I thought, I'm going fishing. And the only time I could go fishing was at night. And it had been raining pretty hard for a couple of days, really hard for a couple of days. Anyway, I called my brother Dan and I said, hey Dan, are you up for some excitement? And Dan says, yeah, what's going on? And I said, well, I'm thinking of going fishing tonight. I'm thinking of taking the drift boat down the Lewis River and trying my luck at fishing. You want to go along? And he says, wow, that sounds kind of dangerous. And I said, well, yeah, probably, but it should be fun. And he said, okay, all right, I'll go. Have you called Roger yet? And Roger was the youngest brother. And I said, no, I'm calling him next. I just wanted to see if you wanted to go. So I called Roger, and Roger says, is Dan going? And I said, yeah. And he said, okay, I'll go. And so they came over to my house, and we took the drift boat. For those of you who don't know, a drift boat is a boat without a motor, and you set in it facing downstream, and you row away from anything you don't want to hit. That's important to remember. You row away from what you don't want to hit. You don't steer around it. So we went out to the Lewis River, out to Daybreak, or out to Louisville Park, and you know the steep hill that goes down where the bridge is that drops down to the river? We lowered the boat down over the hill, and when I got down there, I realized all of a sudden that the river that was supposed to be way down there was way up here. And it was raging and muddy and just a torrent of water. Well, we couldn't get the boat back up the hill, so we thought, well, yeah, we'll just go on down the river. This ought to be pretty fun. So we had two lanterns, two propane, set one on the front, one on the back, and we decided we weren't going to fish because no smart fish would be in that water anyway. And so no smart person would be in that water, probably a better way of saying that. So we headed down the river, and things were going really well until we went around a corner down by Daybreak Park. And there used to be a dike that went along the river, and it had huge cottonwood trees growing on it. Well, the river had eaten under the side of that bank, and one of those trees had come down. The root was still hanging up on this side, but the tree came down, the trunk went under the water, and then the branches and everything was sticking up in the water. Well, when I came around the corner, I saw that tree there, and I started rowing like you can't believe. And I could row pretty good back then. And I thought, I made it. I almost got the boat stopped. It was so close. And the front of that boat just touched the trunk of that tree, and the boat was gone. It was just like it disappeared. It was gone. And I was stretched over the trunk here. My brother Dan was next to me, and he was holding on to the trunk, and Roger was on some of the branches. And I said to him, you guys okay? Yeah. And then the next thing, Dan said to me, Roger's gone. He's not there anymore. He's washed downstream. And I thought, oh man, I just killed my brother, you know. And then I look over at Dan, and he's trying to do something with one of his boots, and he's gone. So here I am alone out in the middle of this river, and I'm thinking to myself, I just killed both of my brothers. What am I going to tell their wives? And then another thought hit me. Wait a second. I'm alone out in this river I'm going to die. Up to this point, I was young, I was active, and the thought of dying, that's for older people. That's for other people. I'm invincible. Nothing can get me. And all of a sudden I was struck with the thought that I'm probably going to die. And I don't think I prayed, because I don't think that I wanted that much to do with God. But I believe that those people that were praying for me, because I live next door to Theron, I believe that God acted on those prayers, and there was no way humanly possible I could get to where I was, from where I was in that river, to crawl along that trunk under the water and come back up. It was humanly impossible. It could not be done. But the last thing I remember was thinking, I need to try to get to the bank. And I started to crawl, and the next thing I knew, I was up out of the water, and I was climbing up the trunk of that tree on dry land, and I heard both my brothers running up the banks, yelling, "Bob, Bob, where are you?" The river had washed them down, and it had come up enough to where it was instead of going around the corner it usually does, it was going through a stand of trees. And when Roger saw trees there, he tried to stand up, and he realized he could stand up. And then he saw Dan coming down the river, and he told Dan to stand up. So they managed to get out, and they thought I was dead because they couldn't find me. So anyway, they came up and they found me. And we, because it was cold, it snowed the next day, and we were in water, so we didn't want to get hypothermia, which, probably did anyway. Anyway, we ran down to get in the pickup, and the boat was gone. So anyway, that was I believe that I was getting discouraged with the horse racing, and so the devil wasn't going to get me trapped into horse racing. And I think that he decided he needed to kill me, because he did not want God getting his hands on me. I belonged to him, and he didn't want to lose me, and he was going to destroy me. But God overruled him. So I sold my half of the horse soon after that at a loss. And the horse did recover, got to race again, but then ended up hurting his leg and was retired from the racing industry. So in about February, I got my job back with my dad. So the prodigal son came home, not in the pig pen, but in the horse stalls. Got my job back, but work was pretty scarce. And so in about February, I came home one evening, one afternoon. I don't know what I'd been doing. And my wife at the time was hysterical, for lack of a better word. She was screaming, she was crying, she was throwing things, she was carrying on. She was making quite a ruckus. And Elizabeth, the neighbor next door, heard all the commotion, and she knocked on the door, and she says, what's wrong? Can I help with anything? And Karen had told me the reason she was so upset is that the lady across the street, Irene, had been talking with her, and she told her that Jesus was going to come back within the next 5 years. The world was going to end. And Karen was not ready for the world to end. There were things she wanted to do. There were things that she just wasn't ready, and she was throwing one tizzy of a fit over it. And so Elizabeth said, well, what Irene said is not all true. You need to know what is really going to happen. And she said, would you be interested in Theron studying the Bible with you and letting you know some of the things that will happen? And I jumped at the chance. I said, yeah, she needs to study. Absolutely, that'll be good for her. Yes, Karen, you need to go. And she says, well, I don't want to go to a Bible study. I said, no, it'll be good for you. It'll be good for you. And she says, well, I'm not going without you. And I said, well, I don't have time for that. And Elizabeth kindly said, well, we can study in the evenings, and you're more than welcome to come. And I said, well, finally, when Karen said she wouldn't go unless I did, I said, well, okay, I'll tell you what. I'll go the first couple nights, then you're on your own. And then you can tell me about it later. And I thought, that's a pretty good compromise. And one of the things that I forgot to tell you is when we were looking at buying a house, I, for some reason, I don't know why, I had noticed one evening on our bookshelf a Bible. And I thought, I think I'll look at that. And I picked it up, and I turned to Revelation, and I kind of thumbed through it, and I got to Revelation 13, and this is what I read. And I stood on the sea, on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, yet upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and his great authority. And I thought, wow, that's some beast. Who is it? What does it mean? And I pondered that, and I thought, well, how am I supposed to know what that means? It's got to mean something, but how am I supposed to know? And the more I thought about it, the madder I got, that God would put something in a book like this and not tell people what it's supposed to mean. And I got mad, and I threw the Bible down. The next night I picked it up again, and I read the same thing again, and I came to the same conclusion, but I got a little bit madder. And after a few nights of that, I finally decided, you know what? This is ridiculous. Why would God do anything like that? And I didn't pick it up again. So when now we decided we were going to go to these 1 or 2 studies, or I was going to go to the 1 or 2 studies with Theron, the first study was Daniel 2. And all of a sudden, here's somebody that can not explain, but can show me how the Bible explains these prophecies. And I was hooked. There was no going back. Our once-a-week studies became 3 times a week. I read everything I could get my hands on. Patriarchs and prophets and kings, everything that Theron gave me, I read. And it was incredible. I found out that the God that I thought was in partnership with the devil wasn't in partnership with the devil. The devil is his enemy. He loves the devil, but the devil's going to be destroyed because of what he did. God is not going to put anyone in hell and burn them for all eternity. And heaven is not sitting on a harp or sitting on a cloud playing a harp. And I began to realize that God's not like I thought he was. He loved me enough to send his son to die for me so that I wouldn't have to die, that I could have a chance at eternal life. And the more I studied, the more I learned, the more I knew that what I had learned before was total misconception. And so on May 17th, 1980, 39 years, whatever it is, from yesterday, the conference office gave Theron Treat permission to baptize Karen and I, his final fruit, his last fruit. And it was incredible. There's some people here today that were there at that baptism, and to me it was one of the highlights of my life. I'd love to say that after I was baptized, things just went along smooth. There were no problems, and me and God were, just stayed close like that, but it would be a lie. A lot of things happened right after I was baptized. The paving company ceased to exist. There were some health issues, a lot of financial problems. But by the mid 80s, things were back on track. God had been faithful. I had a new job, a good job. The kids were going to church school. By the end of the 80s, Shelley, my oldest daughter, was in Walla Walla. Rob was ready to graduate from Columbia Academy. And the job that I had gotten at Tasika Homes, insulating underneath floors, I had graduated, I guess, from underneath floors. That I was now the trainer and the quality control person at Tasika Homes for the jobs that we did for Clark County. And unforeseen things happened that changed my life. The contract we had with Clark County, another contractor underbid us, and so that part of the weatherization went away. We still had the PUD weatherization, so I was doing that. At the end of a year, someone from the county contacted me and said, things didn't go well this last year, and we've been put on probation because of the poor quality of work. Would you consider going to work doing inspections and stuff for Clark County? And my first thought was, I have a good job. Why would I want to do that? And the more I thought about it, prayed about it, it seemed that God was leading me to try something else different out. And so finally I said, okay, I'll give it a try. That year following was an incredible year. I was afraid. I prayed that God would lead me, that God would guide me. Through the year, they tried to bribe me to turn my head at work. When that didn't work, they threatened me, gave me a T-shirt with a bullseye on it and said, here, wear this when you're walking around. The intent was there. They called the state and said that I was trying to ruin them, and had a hearing. They came down to that I had to testify and tell them why I was not passing jobs that they did. Every job that I went out to inspect, every night I would pray, Lord, don't let me make a mistake. These people, the people that I was working for knew that I was a Seventh-day Adventist. And I said, don't let me make a mistake. Don't make me make you look bad. And I would go out on a job and I would pray before I looked at it. And there were many times when I was done doing the inspections and I was on the hood of my pickup with the representative from the contractor there getting ready to sign off on the job. And I would say, Lord, did I miss anything? And in my mind, and this, I don't know what it was. I can't say those words. It's just an impression that said, did you look at such and such? And I would say, oh, just a second, I have to look at this. And there would be something wrong there. And it got to the point where when I would go out after a job's over, the guy from the contractor would just keep talking all the time, try to keep me from thinking or from praying or whatever. Anyway, we got through that year, and the county went from being on probation to being the number one county in the state. And it was because of God. God did it. I didn't do it because I was depending on Him. But as we humans sometimes get, I wish I had have paid more attention to Proverbs 16, verse 18. Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. I started getting pretty proud. Look at what I did. I got asked to sit on a couple of committees representing the state. I got asked to do presentations on quality control at conference. And I didn't give God the credit. Took it to myself. I did it. Look at the things that I did. I thought I was pretty good stuff. And so as things started progressing, I got to travel all over the Pacific Northwest, Alaska, California, Idaho. I went to all these states representing the state of Washington, but I still had my job to do at Clark County. And so time was pretty scarce. So I left off the Bible study. I left off the prayer. I didn't have time for those. I was too busy working. And so in the next few years, I got a lot of kudos, I got a lot of status, and I got really, really proud. And all of a sudden, one day I took a look around. Both of my kids were no longer in church. My wife had decided she didn't want to go to church anymore. She wasn't going to church. And soon after that, I was divorced. So there I was. I was alone by myself because I had left God somewhere else. And I kept going to church because I didn't have any place else to go. But I wasn't praying except at church when I was supposed to, because up to the time I was divorced, I was still an officer in the church. I was still one of the elders. You can't be much more hypocritical than that. And I was Class A #1 hypocrite. And so here I was, all alone, going to church, and I realized I needed to make a choice. And so I thought, how do I do this? And an example, if I leave my key fob there and I walk away, the only way I can get that key fob back is to walk back and get it, right? When you leave God, do you have to walk back? Do you have to retrace your steps? Do you have to get back to the position you were in to be able to reclaim your belief in God? I don't believe you do. But that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to get myself back where I needed to be, to get back in good stead with God. But I had left God. God had not left me. All I had to do was turn to Him, pray, confess what I had done, and God was there all the time. I appreciated Corey's song today because that's the way it is with God. You can't get too far away from Him. You can't escape His love. And so I was struggling. I was still going to church. I wasn't holding any offices. I had stopped all that, and terribly alone. And then God did something miraculous. He sent a woman into my life, an absolutely incredible woman, and it started my life back with Him. We started seeing each other, and after a couple of weeks, Linda asked me, she says, why don't you eat certain things? And I said, well, I don't like those. Why don't you drink alcohol? I don't like the taste of alcohol. How come I never see you on Friday nights or on Saturday? Why didn't we do anything then? And then I had to fess up. Well, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, and Friday night sundown to Saturday night sundown is the time of worship, and so I don't go out. And she got a little upset, and she says, what else haven't you told me? What else don't I know about you? Why do you do these things? Show me. And if any of you know Karen, if any of you know Linda that well, you know that she is very good at asking questions. And one question generally leads to another question. And so her questions led me to open the Bible with her, and that began a little over 2 years of Bible study. Those studies with her reignited my relationship with Jesus. It brought me closer to him to realize, as I was giving studies to Linda, what I was missing myself. I started reading again. I started praying again. And my life started changing back. After a little over 2 years, Linda decided that she was going to be baptized, and soon after that, we were married. And we remained married until today, I think. But it was an incredible journey. What the devil couldn't do through adversity, he did through things going too well. So after we were married, I decided in 2010, we were married in 2003. In 2010, I decided that I wanted to be rebaptized, that I wanted a clean start again with God. So I was baptized in 2010, and shortly after that, we came to Whipple Creek here. And this church has been an absolute blessing to Linda and I both, from the sermons that we hear here to the people that are here. And you've all been a blessing to each one of us. I just kind of like to touch that if any of you, like me, have wandered away and have thought that God can't take me back, I've crossed the line, it's not true. We can't get too far away from God for him to be right there. He doesn't say, oh, I'll find another one. He loves us so much that he will not forsake us no matter what. All the blessings that he pours out on us, and we may turn and take advantage of those and turn our backs on him, he's still there. He's still there waiting. He's just waiting for us to say, Lord, here am I, I'm sorry. Can you forgive me? Will you forgive me? And that's the prayer that he will never refuse to answer. And he'll answer it, yes, I will. There are a lot of times we ask for prayers and God says, that's not really in your best interest. He answers it, but it's not the answer that we want. This is one that he will always say, yes, you're my child, and take us back. So never forget, God has paid the infinite price for each one of us. He gave his son to die in our place. And don't ever forget how much he loves each one of us. And he'll do anything. He will do anything to save you. So, thank you for listening. Let's have a prayer. Father in heaven, thank you for what you've done in my life. And Lord, please bless each one here today. As we leave this sanctuary today, Lord, let us contemplate the mercies that you've shown us.